What kind of experiments are taking place in your neck of the woods? What is happening underground in the mountains behind your subdivision? Could there be illegal, unacknowledged, black budget projects related to UFO and UAP operations taking place right under our noses, behind our homes, in the mountains that we use for trailheads and walking our dogs? Well, if you're in certain parts of Utah, the answer is yes. And the answer may be yes no matter where you are. On today's podcast, we have Elevated Josh, who had an amazing, remarkable experience witnessing something which changed and opened him up in a way, something that elevated his consciousness to a new level. And he has sent me some interesting and curiosity-inducing photos, addresses, and locations which appear to be underground entrances or facilities. He spoke with me at length before the podcast and made it clear that he is somewhat concerned for his safety. Elevated Josh is a hiker and mountaineer who goes into the mountains, which are my old stomping grounds. I love Salt Lake City and I love the Wasatch Front, and he goes to all the best canyons, many of which I know intimately, including Ferguson Canyon. The rabbit hole of UFO high strangeness in Utah is long and deep, but Utah provides a promising new direction for paranormal study. The Uinta Basin of Utah stands on its own, with high strangeness being an almost nightly occurrence. And I can speak from experience that when it comes to the base camp at Space Wolf Research in the Uinta Basin of Utah, you'd be hard-pressed not to see something eventually. And wait until you hear what Elevated Josh has seen in and around Salt Lake City. And really quick before we do, if you have not subscribed to Hero Paranormal on YouTube, please go over to YouTube, look for Hero Paranormal, like, share, and subscribe, because although I will most likely never be monetized on YouTube, that's one way that I can have a little help breaking through the algorithm and at least people can hear the podcast. Also, go to your social media, Instagram and Facebook, look for Hero Paranormal, and follow. And lastly, if you like what you hear and you want to hear a whole lot more of it, there is a ton of content behind the paywall at harrowparanormal.com, or you can go over to Patreon, look for Hero Paranormal, and for less than the price of a cup of coffee a month, you end up with the whole enchilada. All of the content behind the paywall is yours to listen to. Enough of that, so buckle up for an interesting podcast today with Elevated Josh. Come blast off in my time machine, third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off. Blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Blast off on a strange rabbit hole of an episode of the Hyper-Anomalous Esoteric Research Organization podcast, aka Hero Paranormal. Broadcasting from just south of the old Bigelow Ranch in the Uinta Basin of Utah, my name is Ryan, the anomalous ambassador of the airwaves, bringing you a mysterious, tunnel-filled episode today, delving into the rabbit hole of underground Utah and anomalies in the sky along the Wasatch Front with no one other than Elevated Josh. Josh is a researcher, explorer, and adventurer who is right at home in the Wasatch Mountains of Utah. He's been researching a large UFO that he saw over Twin Peaks Mountain in Salt Lake in January of 2018, And possibly the most interesting part is it was accompanied by a number of Blackhawks. Keep in mind this took place in broad daylight in front of a city of 2 million people. Hundreds, if not thousands of people have seen the things in the sky over Utah, and hopefully we can get to the bottom of what is taking place. Not only is this a potential mass sighting, it's a huge story and something we hope to get to the bottom of. Elevated Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Hey man, how's it going?
Oh man, I'm excited. I'm super excited to talk to you. I love all things high strangeness and Utah, and especially given the most recent information that we've kind of been discussing off air. This is going to be an interesting week because I can't wait to just delve into this. And what's the easiest way to delve into this, Josh? Would you like to go into your experiences, accounts, or what you've found over the course of your time there in Utah?
Yeah, Utah is definitely, as far as hotspots go around the world, I'd have to say that Utah is one of the capitals as far as weird stuff that goes on. I mean, all across the state, you have locations everywhere. I mean, everyone knows about Skinwalker Ranch. You're down there, obviously. You know, there's so many weird things that go on down here. I mean, we have the Uinta Basin. Me, personally, I grew up in Salt Lake City, the Holiday area, so it's right at the foot of the beautiful Wasatch Mountains here. We have Mount Olympus, Timpanogos, Twin Peaks, a huge range here of mountains that are relatively new on a geologic time frame. So it's like a lot of the granite and the crust that's been pushed up here is, I guess, fresh in an earthly perspective as compared to, like, let's say, some of the mountain ranges on the East Coast, for example. So there's a lot of interesting geology here, and personally in Salt Lake, I've witnessed quite a few interesting things and heard quite a few stories just about the mountains right outside the city here in Salt Lake. And the first, I guess, I was never a guy that really was into aliens or was into, like, paranormal stuff. I was kind of just a regular, 20-year-old dude that kind of just wanted to do my thing, talk to girls, all that stuff. And in 2010, I was with my dad. We were cooking on our back, like in our back kitchen there, and we always fed these baby raccoons that would come out of the protected wetland that was behind the house. And so at nights, when it got dark, I'd go out back because our patio was, I don't know, give or take 15 feet above the ground, so we could see directly into the trees. So we either turn the light on or I'd get a flashlight and shine it into the trees so we could see the eye shine from the raccoons there. Well, tonight was a little different. This night was a little different because I walked out there and I was looking into the trees, and it's like if you're in a dark room and somebody flips a light switch on, that's what happened. It was completely surprising. I'd never obviously witnessed anything like this, and so I look around, I look up, and up above me to my left, it's hard to tell, anywhere from like maybe 20 to 50 feet above me was a 10 to 12 foot diameter glowing orb that was golden, white colors, I guess, and it's hard to explain. I had a feeling when it appeared above me at the time that I was not able to really describe until I'd heard it later described by others years later. And it was a feeling of it being inside my head. Like, I don't know how to explain this, but it was inside of me. I felt a presence inside of me that was not me, even though it wasn't communicating. It's like something bumped into my consciousness there and was like, hey, I'm in here. I'm paying attention to what, you're thinking. And it was a really strange connection. And I heard, in 2017 when the Nimitz case came out, and Fravor and all these different accounts from the military had been starting to drip out, that they had experienced phenomena with these crafts when they encountered them that was along the same lines, in the sense that the things knew what they were going to do before they did it. So when they were hitting them with the targeting pods, right before they did it, these things were able to jam their radar, jam their pods, so essentially they weren't able to target these targets like they were supposed to. And that's the same kind of phenomenon that I felt, but I didn't know at the time. So I looked up at this thing, felt that connection, and it was getting off this light. I don't know how to explain it. It's illuminating the area, but there's not actually any physical light coming out of it. And I don't know how to explain what that looks like either. It's such a strange idea to have to interpret. But this all happened within maybe 10, 15 seconds. And I look up at it, I noticed these things, really quickly in my head, and I call my dad. I'm like, Dad, come out here. And he's about 10 feet away. He has a camera on a tripod. So he runs over, plops it down. We look up at it, and right as we point the camera up, I don't know how to explain this. There was like this strange perception slip or maybe movement and whatever it was, but it blinked backwards quite quickly. Like, it went from being a few feet away to being maybe a quarter mile away out in the sky instantly. And as soon as I pressed record, it did a box essentially up in the air. So if you imagine you're looking up at it, it does 3 left angle turns and then shoots up into the sky in less than a second and a half. I mean, it was, really, really quick. And that was the first experience I ever had. It started leading me to essentially this huge rabbit hole of all these different topics that I had never even heard of or had interest in the past. And a lot of it has to do with the way when you experience things like this, it changes the way you look at things, because not only is everything that you know tipped upside down on its head when you can't explain what you've seen, but your beliefs get questioned. It breaks you down in a lot of ways is the best way to describe it. And I think that might be what the meaning is for some of these experiences for a lot of people. I mean, none of us have answers to what goes on with any paranormal phenomena, whether it be, ghosts, fairies, UFOs, all kinds of weird stuff out there. We really don't have answers. Granted, we haven't spent a lot of time or money researching these things. The paradigm's starting to change now, which is good, but a lot of these things aren't really understood. But I believe that the dripping into our consciousness of experiences like this has some kind of effect, because for me personally, this first experience is the one that really transformed me. Everything about me changed after that day. Like the questions, the methods of approach that I had towards life, the way I looked at people, everything had a different meaning to it, a more positive meaning overall, but it put a different meaning into life and showed me that the world's a lot weirder than people give it credit for. And I think our history and a lot of the things that have been presented to us, especially currently, are not exactly as we understand them, is the best way to put it, or things aren't what we think they are. And I think we need to pay more attention to the stuff like this and stories like this that are coming out from people, because I believe there's a meaning. I think there's a meaning of shifting of consciousness that's supposed to happen, because for me personally, it was so direct, intense, in your face, and kind of mind splitting that I can't imagine any other reason for things like that popping up. And whether I encountered, something that it was definitely conscious, but whether or not it was actually nuts and bolts or it was a spiritual phenomenon, either way, it had the same effect. And I think those kinds of things are good for people. But as far as the reason that I contacted you personally in the first place is because I've heard about your research, in this whole area with you in a basin and all the people you bring onto your show. I've heard a lot of good stuff about, my part of the world, I guess, that's really great, because there's a lot that goes on in our backyard. So I contacted you because of the stuff I saw up here in 2018. I know quite a few other people saw. I'll just get right into it, I guess. Like, I'm completely terrified about saying this on air, as I explained to you earlier. So forgive me, guys, if my voice is a little shaky and stuff. But basically, what happened is the date is January 13th of 2018. Put that out there clearly, January 13th of 2018. So if anyone out there has seen this or experienced it on this date, please raise your hand, say something about it. Anyway, I'm sitting there with my mother. I don't want to give an exact location as to where we are, but we're a few miles away, just west of Mount Olympus here in Salt Lake. And so the entire valley has quite a grand view of this mountain. It's gigantic. It's bold, these rock faces, like, it's the first thing that catches your eye anywhere in the valley when you're looking up or around. And so essentially we're sitting there and we're talking about the sky. And at the time we were like, I was really, really big into conspiracy stuff at the time. And I was talking about chemtrails. And the first thing, this is over a 5-minute period of time, I'd imagine. It's hard to really tell because there's so much that went on. But the first thing that really popped up in my head is we noticed a lot of planes going by overhead at the same time, which was really strange. Like in the air here, maybe in any part of town at once, 2, 3 planes overhead at a time max on like a really busy day maybe. But today we were counting like over 10. I can't remember exactly how many. It was like 12 to 15. The transponder website that I checked at the time to check to see, what kind of the flights were going on in the area at the time didn't have any of these flights marked on its maps, which I found kind of weird. And that alone doesn't mean anything. But I checked this all later, and we couldn't find any data for these flights, which was strange. So that's the first thing in the series of events that happened in those 5 minutes. It kind of caught my attention. And as we're noticing that, we don't hear, but we see a string of, I want to say anywhere from like 10 to 12 helicopters flying by overhead. So we're looking at the mountain. We're looking east from the west side of the mountain. And these helicopters are coming from, I would say, it would be the northwest side of us. So they come across, and what was interesting is I couldn't hear them. That's the first thing that blew my mind. I know if they're under 500 feet or right around 500 feet, where I think they were in the 500 to 1,000 foot range, you should have been able to hear those things. 10 helicopters, 12 helicopters going by. That's loud. There's no way that wouldn't have made a huge rumble over the valley. And the first thing I noticed is there wasn't really much of any sound coming from these things. So, conspiracy mind, the first thing that ticked me off is I'm like, oh, those don't make noise. Those must be those same ones maybe that they talked about in the Osama raids in 2011 when they talked about crashing that top secret helicopter into the wall of the compound. That's the first thing I thought. So I see these things coming over, and we're watching them approach the mountain. And if you view Mount Olympus from anywhere in the East Bench area, you're going to see kind of like a little twin peak looking thing, like an M arch, or not arch, but an M to the peak there. And these helicopters, what they do is if you draw a line straight through the peak, cut the mountain in half, they do a perfect circle. So they line up and they start a circle over the top of the mountain. And so they're doing this for a few seconds. And this is insane. One of these Black Hawks comes back into the middle of the circle. And at this point, we had binoculars sitting on my mother's coffee table. I picked those up and was looking at the situation through the binoculars. This Black Hawk drops what looks to be that droid that Vader uses to interrogate Luke in Star Wars down between the arches of the mountain, or the peaks of the mountain, which was really strange. And I couldn't really tell what it was from what I was looking at, but it looked like that droid from Star Wars. It was a black ball with a little red-looking dot on it dropping down between the peaks. That helicopter, then I see another ball come up out of the peaks up into the helicopter, and I couldn't really tell if it was going behind it or if it was somehow going up into the helicopter from the bottom. It was impossible to see because I didn't have the range on the binos. But anyway, that second sphere goes back up in the helicopter. It breaks back up into the circle. That circle then widens out. So it gets to the point where it's surrounding both of these peaks on Mount Olympus. And as that happens and they finish widening the circle out, if you look at a barbell weight on the ground, you pick it up. If you look at it in your hand and you turn it sideways so it's sitting vertically instead of horizontally, that is what appeared in the middle of the circle of helicopters. So essentially a gigantic barbell weight. It had a square top and a square bottom. They were both black. There was a gray bar in the middle where the hand grip would be on the barbell. That part was gray. The top and the bottom square portions, they were black as far as I could tell, and very square, perfect squares. And the top portion had this interesting ray aspect coming out of it. If you look at the sun, you see the rays coming off the sun. That's what I was seeing. It was like rays coming out the top of this thing, and almost like a halo of light around the top of it. And we're watching this thing for a few seconds, and as this thing appears, and it just phases into this circle of helicopters, and it had to have been, I can't judge, I was too far away, but I want to say it was about at least 10 times the size of each one of these choppers. So if a chopper is, 12 to 16 feet, something like that in height, this thing had to have been a few hundred feet tall, in my opinion, from where I saw it. So the idea of something that big sitting there, it just it blew my mind. Me and my mom looked at each other, and her neighbor was across the way and seeing it too. We'd never seen anything like that. I mean, how do you explain something like that? I immediately thought it was projection technology, something along those lines, but I had no idea. So we were flabbergasted, and we looked at each other, and the clouds in that area, there were a few clouds over the peaks, and it was interesting because this thing started moving south, and as it was moving south, all the clouds around it started turning orange, and like, I don't know how to explain the squiggling, like making little caterpillar motions almost. That's the best way to describe it. And it was only in like a localized area around this thing. It wasn't the entire sky. It was just within, a small radius. Like I'd say like a mile radius around this thing, that these clouds were orange. And we're noticing this too. And as it starts moving south, I've heard this a lot of times too. I go to take my camera out. As soon as I go to press the button, the instant my phone touches the screen, that thing phases out, completely phases out, and the helicopters go back in a line back towards the northwest. So northwest, to me, that same direction is Dugway. It's Dugway Air Base, or the Proving Grounds. I've been out there quite a few times. Like you make a straight line from that direction down, you get right to the base. And so whatever that was that day had to have been, at first I thought it was projection technology, but all the other aspects and the phenomena that surrounded it, included with the size of it and the way it moved, I can't think that it would be anything but some kind of technology that we're not being told about. And I'm not saying it's, it doesn't have to always be an alien thing. It doesn't have to be nuts and bolts. It could be a lot of things, but whatever that was something that I know can probably benefit a lot of people if given the chance or if utilized in the correct way. But my issue with these situations and with what we're seeing with a lot of the technologies that we're hearing about nowadays, but we're not being presented any evidence of, in the case of gravitational UFOs and all the things that are being talked about in the news as far as the UAPs go, that kind of technology can be used for good. And my issue is that it's being hidden from us and seemingly most likely weaponized at this point, if we're really talking about the government. I mean, at this point, they've got a proven track record of just about doing anything they can to weaponize whatever they can get their hands on. So that's my problem with all this. It's not, aliens are great and all that, but there really are hundreds of millions of lives that could be saved with the technologies that are being hidden from us. And I know these things are going on. I've seen it multiple times myself. So I want people to speak up more, because the valley here at the time this happened had somewhere right around, I think it's 1.5, 2 million, something like that. We have over 1 million people in this valley. So the chances of nobody seeing this in broad daylight on top of a peak in a busy city, I mean, it's impossible, Ryan. So that's why I wanted to talk to you, because you're local, I knew that there's probably people from this area that listen to your podcast, which is great, by the way, but there's got to be people out there that have seen this, and I don't know what's going to happen from this. I don't know if there's going to be any consequences. I'm not trying to give away military secrets. I'm not trying to piss anybody off, but if stuff like that is going on in the middle of the day in a busy city, they had to have wanted people to see it at the same time, which is the other side of this. It's like you don't do full operations like this with secret technology in the middle of the day without already knowing people are going to see it. I mean, they were no way trying to hide this. And so that's where I'm having an issue. It's like, well, are they really, did they want to see us to see this? And if so, how come no one's talked about it? Because honestly, the looks I get from telling this story, man, it sounds crazy when you say this to people and trying to tell it to people. It's intimidating, because I have yet to really have many people that have heard this and not immediately thought I was absolutely insane. But that's kind of the idea right now, is I want to get it out there, and I really hope that we can figure out what this is, because I've been doing as much as I can to get up there and get to those spots and try to figure out what's going on, because it's bugged me for 5 years now, and it was traumatizing to a point, if that makes a lot of sense. I've heard that from other people in the past that have had experiences that have kind of hit them the wrong way, and that's what the second one felt like. I've had good experiences with stuff I can't explain, but this one was not great, and it didn't feel good in a way. Like I felt like I was witnessing something that probably wasn't something that I wanted to see. So in that case, raise the red flag about it.
Man, it is a super compelling, I think it's a super compelling thing you witnessed. And that experience is pretty wild. The barbell and the way you explained it, having the black ends, the gray bar, and then the light kind of at the top of it. Yeah, I think that, the fact that you mentioned it got inside your head is a great way to elaborate on your experience, because I personally agree with you. I think that these events have a way of changing us in a way, kind of opening us up.
Yeah, most definitely.
They like elevate our consciousness to a new level. And I think a paranormal tap on the shoulder is exactly what a lot of humanity needs.
Yeah, you are exactly right, man. You are exactly right about that. Yeah, I totally agree. I really hope that, with everything that's going on right now, as far as the news around UFOs goes and UAPs, I mean, a lot of the people that listen to your show will probably be up on this topic, so I probably don't need to explain a lot of it, but there's a lot going on right now behind the scenes. There's a lot going on in the news up front. We got, 32 days away now. We have the NASA hearing. With NASA, the guys that always tell the truth, they're going to come out and tell us, answer all our UFO and UAP questions because, why wouldn't they tell us the truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure they'll give us all the information they know.
It's going to be interesting.
I don't know. It's going to be interesting. There's a lot that's going on, and I'm just hoping that all of this kind of shifts the paradigm a little bit. And the stigma is the main thing. There's a huge stigma still around paranormal and UFO experiences and unexplainable stuff. And it would be really, really cool if more people were turned on to it, because I think the way our brains are built, if you think about it, a lot of us just want to live our lives trying to see something that's going to make you restructure your whole belief system and what you think about yourself and everything around you. Like, that's not something a lot of people really want to do on a daily basis, and I didn't either. A lot of people don't. I know a lot of people that have experienced things like this where it just kind of changes them and shits them out. And that's what it did to me, and it's positive for a lot of people. But these mountains, man, like Utah and Salt Lake especially, there's so much strange stuff that goes on around here. Mount Olympus, besides the story I told you earlier, there's a few months before that, this whole thing happened. Me and my family were viewing every morning, and I can't remember the dates on this. I guess it would be from the end of October of 2018 to January of 2018. There were fairy lights all over the mountain before the sun came up. So we'd sit there some mornings, and before the sun came up, you'd see different kinds of lights on the mountain. And usually, I'd always try to explain this stuff away, get the binoculars out, look for climbers with headlamps, all kinds of things that I could do to explain what we were actually seeing, but I could never figure it out. There weren't any climbers on the mountain, and we were seeing essentially fairy lights for months on end. I don't know why I never thought to record any of this either. It's such a strange experience. When you see this a lot of the time, it's like you never have, a lot of the time don't have the thought of recording it, which is really strange. My dad still got, I can probably have my dad show you the first video, the first thing we recorded, but these other two experiences, man, you're so out of your mind when you see it that it's hard to ever record it, I guess. But these fairy lights, man, they were on the mountain for a couple months at a time. They'd go up and around and do all these zigzags and different shapes on the mountain. They'd be all like a rainbow of colors. They'd blink in and out. At the time, this is 5-6 years ago, I'd heard about Stephen Greer's CE5 stuff, and so I was like, I wonder if I could just think at them a little bit and tell them to do different shapes, and they'll do it. And it worked a couple times. They'd go up above the mountain and do squares, and sometimes they'd do tetrahedrons and different kinds of geometries, which is really interesting. And I think whoever's operating and doing things in this area, which I'd imagine is the military, and maybe we have some other projects going on, some other unacknowledged stuff, but whoever is operating in this area, I think is very, very familiar with the effects of the geology here, because we have like a large, large, large amount of quartz in these mountains. Like, the quartz content in these rocks is insane, man. I mean, I'm not a geologist, but you can just go up there and look at the quartz in the rock and the granite. And so I've heard and studied over the years about the different effects geologies can have in an area, as far as paranormal activity goes. And there's missing 411 David Paulides. He made some points quite a while back about finding different patterns of disappearances and strange phenomena in these places where there were underground aquifers, where there were high amounts of quartzite in the rock, which is exactly what you have here. So whoever is operating here knows that there's also something going on in the land here, and probably not just here, I mean, in a ton of other places. If they figured it out here, they figured it out at other places. But the interesting part of this, and the reason that it's bugging me, is because the Mormon Church operates here too, and they've dug their own vaults into granite over here, down in Draper, I guess it would be the area of the city where the vault is above. But Granite Rock down here is their vault, and they supposedly, they spent millions of dollars on it, drilled this gigantic vault. It's big enough to hold a semi into the mountain, and apparently what they're doing is storing geology and genealogical records there, and that's understandable, but that's a lot of tunnel, man, for those records. And they say they hold different religious artifacts and things like that. But I'm starting to wonder if maybe there's something going on with the church and the military here, because they both operate in these mountains, and I can't imagine that with the tunnel systems that we have in Salt Lake, that there isn't some kind of agreement going on as well between the church and the military, or some proxies or another from either one of these organizations. Because I have heard lots of stories from lots of people in the area, different contractors, that have told me different experiences they've had either up in the mountains. I've heard of people that have been contractors digging the caves when the granite vaults were dug for the church down in Draper. I've heard of people, doing plumbing work, talking about tunnels underground in downtown Salt Lake City. So if there's a network of tunnels down there, I would imagine that network of tunnels probably stretches way farther than just downtown. And, if you're into the conspiracy world, and everyone's heard about the Denver airport conspiracy theories and the massive networks of tunnels that are supposed to be dug underneath the entirety of the U.S. continent, which we can't prove, but from a strategic point of view, I wouldn't see any reason why they wouldn't do it. It would be a really smart idea strategically and for security, operational security. So I'm thinking that those tunnel systems also are tied in here as well. But the only problem is we don't know where the entrances are. These things are guarded. As far as we can tell, everything is guarded and locked up from all the places that you could possibly conspicuously enter these tunnels. So I think most of the entrances are probably underground here too, and that leads you straight to Dugway. If you go by process of elimination, like, you got some underground tunnels buried in this area used for military stuff, they're going to go to Dugway. And we've all heard the stories about them having possibly an underground base there, which at this point I would not be surprised. I would bet my life on the fact that there's a lot of secret stuff going on there. So I'm starting to think maybe Dugway's in the Area 51 too, man, because I didn't think that at first when I started researching, but, Alien Dave's a good one. His stories are really interesting from over there, and there's a lot that goes on, and I think more work needs to be done to put all this stuff together, because it's a really interesting story as far as the investigation goes. But at the same time, there's some good that comes from all this, because these kind of technologies that are being researched and possibly used need to be shared with us as a community, as a human population. Like, there's tons of lives that could have been saved probably from all these technologies that are being hidden from us. So hopefully with all the push that's going on in the media and the news and in politics and with the culture, with the way we're viewing things, I'm hoping all of this kind of coalesces into like a force that we can use at this right time to be able to do investigations like this and not have it be stigmatized, criticized, or have yourself killed like people have in the past. I hate to say it, but it's true. Like, there's a lot of really crazy stuff that happens when people start talking about these kinds of things in the wrong way, in the wrong proximity to certain government organizations and such. So that's where I get a little nervous. And I just want to say again for the record, Dugway, if you guys ever hear this, please please don't try to come after me. I just am a guy that saw some stuff, and I don't want to be persecuted for it. I just want to know what was going on. If you guys can just tell me, that's cool. If not, please don't send me to prison for this.
Yeah, it's interesting how Dugway. I'm glad that you mentioned you mentioned Dugway because you're right. Alien Dave Rosenfeld has been out there quite a bit, and as you mentioned, he has had people visit him and say, can you please take these photos down off of your website, etc. And as I'm sure the intelligence community sees Utah Valley and Salt Lake City as perfect places to harvest for new agents for the CIA and other intelligence organizations.
What I've heard. Yeah, that's what I've heard, huh?
Yeah, and you've hit on something fairly important, which is as far as these felt-bladed silent helicopters, such as the ones purportedly used in the Osama bin Laden raid, they are very real.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly. And I've been told they're used more than most of us would imagine. And getting back to your experience, do you think it was related to some of these possible tunnels in the mountain? And if so, how?
Yeah, most definitely. Sorry, there's a lot that's gone on in my head while explaining this. So if I'm not very clear in linking the thoughts, I apologize. But yeah, I do think so. Like, when those helicopters first hit the mountain and whatever was dropped out of the bottom of that thing was dropped out of the bottom of that thing, it had to have gone somewhere or it replaced something else. So one went down, another one came up. I don't know if it was the same one or it was a separate object, but either way, something was lowered there. So I don't know what kind of device it was. It's hard to tell, and I haven't really done a lot of thought about that part of it either, because the whole idea of all of it, the UFO itself kind of takes over everything, but there was a lot of stuff that happened there that I even myself sometimes glance over. But this device, I don't know, man. It had to have gone somewhere down into the canyon. And if you look at it from Google Earth, the terrain there kind of dips down into, I'd say like a diamond-esque canyon. And so I don't know specifically where exactly that was dropped. I can see it from this 2D perspective, but on Google Earth, it looks like that area is most behind the first peak is mostly what looks to be saddlebags. And so it leads me to believe that somewhere in that greenery and those meadows that are up there, they dropped that thing or it replaced something else, but I don't know what that was about. I do know it was connected to the mountain in some way, because it doesn't make sense for them to have a proving ground that's the size of Rhode Island out here as a base, all this space, all this airspace, if they're testing secret weapons, if they're testing technology we don't know about, for them to then parade a line of helicopters across this huge city on top of the biggest mountain in the city, and then have this gigantic, freaky-looking barbell sitting over the mountain peak. Like, it makes absolutely no sense from an operational, security perspective, or an intelligence perspective, or a black ops perspective. To me, almost, it seems like a psyop kind of thing, but nobody's talked about it, and that's what's weird to me. It was presented like, hey, look at this, because whatever happened up there, they were definitely not trying to keep it secret. So that leads me to believe it's some kind of psyop, and if it's a psyop, then you guys need to tell us more, because this is broad daylight stuff, and it's somehow related to these mountains. And it maybe could have been a projection technology too. Like I said, I don't know anything. I'm just going by what I've observed, and it could be a lot of different kind of technologies, but whatever they're doing, they're using that area behind the peaks. And I've done my best over the last month and a half, since the weather's been better and the snow's been melted, to get up there this year and actually start looking at the area and observing what's going on in the area, because I'm sure at this point there's got to be tunnels that run either under that mountain or up into it. And I think there might actually, this is just a thought, a theory, but there might actually be something inside the mountain there. And we'll see, I guess. I'm going to do my best to get up there. I've observed from Ferguson Canyon, which is a canyon that looks onto Olympus from the south. And so I've taken quite a few, I can send you the pictures too. I've taken quite a few pictures and gone to Google Earth and done my best to get an idea and a gauge of what that area is like. There's lots of people from all trails and online that have different pictures of the area, which is strange because it gets explored a lot. So, you know, if there was something secret going up there as well, like going on up there as well, people probably would have seen something, because there's 30 or 40 hikers that summit that mountain every day when the weather's good. So I can't imagine that, you know, the military is going to set up some secret entrance to a base on top of the mountain right there either. So when you think about it, I'm trying to be smart about it, because a lot of it, if you just take it up front, doesn't make a lot of sense unless it's something that they wanted to be seen. But I don't know, man. At this point, I'm blown away either way. I'm just hoping that between what I'm doing here and maybe getting this out and having people's ears hear it and, you know, network it out there, that maybe we can get some more information and some more data. Because the experiences that me and my mother and her neighbor had were just absolutely unbelievable, man. And I just kind of want some answers at this point, because it's been a long process. It's been kind of traumatic in a lot of ways, man. When we saw that stuff, I didn't sleep for a week. My mom didn't sleep for, God, I don't know how long. It was 2 weeks after that, like on and off. She couldn't sleep at night. She kept telling me weird stuff, like she was seeing kids that didn't look like kids outside of her window at night. Just all kinds of craziness, man. And that part, even, I was like, yeah, Mom, you're probably just sleep deprived, you know. But at the same time, that's really weird. Like, in the months after this happened, we were having like red lights. Like, I don't know how to explain this. Like, red lights in our rooms. So I'd call her and she'd have a red light in her room at night, like floating around in her room. And I had the same thing happen where I'd wake up a couple of nights and there'd be this red squishy ball looking thing floating around my room. And I can't tell you what it is. I searched my whole house and there was nothing there. Every time there was no one in the house. It's just weird paranormal phenomena that surrounded this incident. And I don't know if, you know, any of it had to do somehow with observing that thing, but every time I've had an experience with one of these UFOs, UAPs, or whatever you want to call them, there's always strangeness that follows around it. Like, things are always strange around it. And I don't know if that's, you know, a localized effect that has something to do with perception or what it is, but there was a lot of sensory inundation that was going on in all of these experiences as well. So, like, you know, you'd have like these orange clouds, you'd have what looked to be like chaff in the periphery of your vision when you'd see this thing, like, and that happened both times as well. Like, so I don't really know if that's a personal thing for me or if it's something that's taken from observing whatever you're observing, but I know there's got to be other people that have felt these things too, and that's why I'm interested to see, because my experience, it was a full body thing, and if that happened to me, it happened to the other people that saw it. So if there's any listeners from Salt Lake, you guys please call in. Like, if you or anyone you know has ever talked about this, please say something. I can put I don't have social media, but I can give you guys my email. You guys can email me. Like, I want to get something going with this, because I feel like we can get some answers, or at least get the base to talk about it. It'll make me feel a lot better about the whole situation. I'd, in a sense, need some closure. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like, to this whole thing, just, yeah, it's been quite crazy, and it's been a roller coaster. So yeah, I'm just hoping I can get up there and do, you know, the most investigation I can. I'm gonna, this weekend, probably Saturday or Sunday. I shouldn't have said that on the podcast. I'm gonna go up there and see what I can do about just checking out the area. I'm gonna hike to the summit. I'm gonna go to the saddleback behind it and see what's going on back there and see if I see any weirdness. I'd like to get some equipment up there, but that's something that has to be planned out. But there's so many options, man, and there's so much weirdness that goes on in all these mountains. So I'm just going to continue this. If there's anyone out there that has seen this stuff, let Ryan or me know, and I'd love to just, you know, get some investigations going and get up there and actually maybe find some answers to this stuff, because people aren't talking and they need to talk.
No, man. And it does seem as if a lot of these things are hidden in plain sight. I'm glad you mentioned Stephen Greer and CE5 because, there is a ton going on with him as well. We have, of course, NASA coming out, as you said, with Never a Straight Answer. And then we have Stephen Greer, the founder of the Disclosure Project, and he's coming out with all kinds of purportedly amazing unacknowledged black budget projects and whistleblowers who have been granted that ability to whistleblow and not deal with the repercussions, supposedly. And I know a few of those whistleblowers, but the stuff they're talking about is crazy. And like you're saying, it's pretty compelling. Like the stuff that they claim is taking place in broad daylight. And to be completely honest with you, this stuff happens and the majority of the population does nothing about it, Josh. The most interesting thing happened to me about a year and a half ago. And my neighbor across the street saw it, and she's a nurse. And basically, after we saw it, she said, "Oh, that was interesting." And she went in her house. I was like, wait a minute. And, it was, and it again was something hanging from a helicopter. It looked very similar to a black ball emitting purple smoke. And, it was huge. It was like the size of a small smart car. And it looked like one of those things you give like like kids on the 4th of July, those smoke bombs. But getting back to these tunnels and the possibility of these tunnels being involved. Ferguson Canyon, by the way, very interesting place. I had for people that have not been there, right? It's got a vibe all its own.
I've always been drawn to that canyon, man. I don't know what it is, and that's another weird aspect of this whole thing. At least for me personally, is ever since we used to go up there. I grew up here my whole life, and I used to go up there as kids. Kids go up there and they get stoned. Well, the kids go up there and they get high. That's what they do. We used to go up when I was 14, 15, 16, and we'd go up there and smoke weed like teenagers. And ever since I started there, dude, I just could never stop going there or being drawn to it. And it's the geology of that canyon specifically, as opposed to others just in the direct localized area, it's a little different. Just the way that I guess the crust has come up there, the way that the sand has eroded off the tops of the mountains, because you have a mix of like sandstone and granite there in a strange mix. And you got the stream from the runoff coming down, especially right now, in massive quantities down the canyon, which it just makes for this weird energy in the area, and it's hard to explain unless you go down there, but it feels great. And at the moment, there is so much quartz coming out of there. Like the runoff stream right now, because we've had so much precipitation and so much snow this last winter, the stream itself is just shooting like a rocket, man. You can put your hand straight into the stream there. It's not a stream anymore. It's a river. You can put your hand in there and literally just pull your hand out and have quartz sitting on your hand. Like there is so much of it. So yeah, Ferguson's really great. And the tunnel systems, man, I've heard lots of stories about the ones downtown. I know they built tunnel systems under the temple and to the banks. I can't remember exactly what year this was done. It was 1800s somewhere, late 1800s. But all these tunnels were dug, and I think they just continued those complexes. Because I know lots of people. I actually work with one guy right now, and I've known two others in the past that have all gone down there and done different kinds of jobs underground in downtown Salt Lake City. And there's so much infrastructure down there. It's insane. I used to live down on East Temple, right across from the lodge down there, the Mason Lodge. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because you walk down East Temple there downtown, and you can see some of the locked doors for some of these tunnel entrances. It's really insane, and they're everywhere, and they're obviously not accessible. I don't know if they're guarded in some spots. I've just heard stories of that. But I have heard stories of essentially like giant command centers under the temple and the tunnels that different people that I know have seen and witnessed under there. I had a friend that I've talked to that said that he had to do some work down there and was walked through a hallway where he saw tons of monitors that what seemed to be like lots of different countries and places around the world and what looked to be a command center with a bunch of people manning these computers and these monitors. And he said it was a few years before they had big screens like that too, which was really strange to him. So that's just the story. It's just hearsay, but there's lots of stories and lots of hearsay about that kind of stuff in this area. And I mean, one white crow's one thing, two white crows, that's another. But when you got like piles and piles of people saying the same thing, it can't be for no reason. There's always got to be some kernel of truth in that, and that's where I try to plug into it. Try to look at it a little farther and be like, all right, well, what really is going on here? This is my backyard. I love this place, and I just want to make sure that there isn't nefarious, pardon my language, but nefarious bullshit going on in my backyard. We got enough of that going on. We don't need like super government, secret tech being exposed in front of the mountains right here. I mean, God, if somebody's grandma saw that, I'd be surprised if she had a damn heart attack on the spot, man. Like, it's pretty insane. So it's like, I want to do some research into Salt Lake and just see what's going on here, because there's so many secrets. And Dugway itself, I mean, Dave Rosenfeld, that's his last name, right? Dave. But that's what I thought. Anyway, his stuff, some of the stuff he's seen, man, it's just absolutely insane. Like the laser beam photos, the Apache video. I show people that video sometimes, and they don't even know what to think of it. They're like, "This is really the military doing this?" I'm like, "Yeah, apparently." Like the guys out at Dugway, they do not joke around, and I've heard some of the stories about them, accidentally releasing viruses and things like that in the past. That got into the news a few years ago. And it just makes you wonder sometimes. It feels like a lot of the stuff really is for our consumption, and especially stuff that's in broad daylight in the middle of the day. It makes really no other sense besides the fact that they wanted somebody to know. And I'm starting to wonder if maybe that was just part of this disclosure drip they were talking about. Maybe... I don't think that this whole effort, as far as revealing UAPs and this UFO tech to the public, I don't think it's a monolithic effort. It's definitely not. It may seem like that up front, but Stephen Greer, I feel like people say what they say about him, but I feel like the way he addresses the topic and how he explains it is very realistic, and it makes a lot of sense that there's different factions. There's different agendas. There's different people involved in getting this tech out. And a lot of people think it's this monolithic, organization, the government, that's doing all this, and it's really not. There's a lot of different people that want a lot of different things, and I'm really excited. I think the paradigm's changing. I just want to kind of get people talking about this kind of stuff more and stop being so afraid to say what you feel, because there's a lot of weird stuff that happens that is real, and you know about it, I know about it, and I've seen studies and some of the places I've read where they're saying that like 1 in 10 people have witnessed things like this. They just don't talk about it. That's a huge percentage of the population, man. It's a lot of people. So at this point, if we just talk about it and kind of start getting the word out there about these things, I'm hoping that more people will be comfortable, because people come to me now, but it's still pretty rarely. It's more than it used to be, but I still get really cool stories that people will tell me, usually on a weekly basis, about something they've seen. So I like being that person. It's cool. Like, I don't care if I get labeled crazy. It's cool being able to hear these stories from people and having people trust you with, stuff that has essentially turned their lives upside down. So it's interesting.
And this stuff does kind of have that effect on people. I remember a friend of mine who started working for a company named Osmos. He was running cable for miles and miles in some of these vaults that you have talked about that are connected to the church. And he said that he believed there was a bit more going on as well, just because it was miles and miles in a golf cart inside of a mountain. And you've sent me some very interesting and curiosity-inducing photos, addresses, and locations where there seem to be entrances or possibly underground facilities. Can we hit upon that real quick?
Yeah, I want to preface that by saying that this is a preliminary thing. I am in no way saying that what I sent you, or if people see this, no. I don't know what it is either. But this is from 2 hours of observation. I saw some weird stuff out there. The coordinates I sent you were from a spot that you can observe from Ferguson Canyon. So if you look down into Big Cottonwood Canyon, the entrance of Big Cottonwood Canyon, you go about 300 feet or yards down on your left side, there will be a water treatment plant. Right past that's a guard shack for a private neighborhood. I believe it's called Castle View or Castle Gate Drive. I'm probably wrong about that. But it winds up the mountain towards the base of the mountain. And it has quite a few, I'd say about a dozen houses up there that have been built. They're all really strange looking. They kind of seem out of place. Very expensive houses. Interestingly enough, there's a road at the back of these houses in this neighborhood. So if you wind your way to the back, there's another smaller road that leads off to the base of the mountain. The picture I sent you was from Google Earth or Google Maps. And what's interesting is if you look at this spot, it could just be a state, it could just be a state door. It could be leading off into something innocuous, which is probably the case. But considering what I've seen here in this area and other investigations people have done and all the hearsay, you put it all together, there's got to be entrances into this place somewhere. So I'd imagine this door might be one. Anyway, this door, it looks to be metal, obviously. It's got a box next to it. There's pipes coming out of out of the ground behind the door. So essentially it leads into a room that has what look to be air ventilation pipes coming out of it. But the strange thing that I really don't understand is the road keeps going after you hit the door, and it curves up around onto the roof of this room, essentially, that's in the mountain. And it looks to be maybe not reinforced, but they've terraced the land right there around that curve, so it looks like it's meant to take weight, like it needs to take weight. And I would guess pretty frequently if they spent the money to put, a terraced retaining wall there. So this is just a theory, but I've seen guys pull up in that truck, talk to the box, and walk in. So I'm wondering if maybe there's something going on right there, too, or if maybe that's an entrance to one of these things. Because, strategically, from the strategic perspective, it's behind a locked gate in a neighborhood, at the back of a neighborhood, behind another locked door inside of a mountain that has had a bunch of weird stuff happening on top of it. So,
yeah,
I feel like it's a good first. it's a good first exploration. That's the first thing I noticed. I'm going to go farther up into the canyon this week or weekend and see what I can find. But yeah, this is a very strange find, and I don't, it could, like Occam's razor, it could probably just be something innocuous. But I need to research. I work 7 days a week, so I haven't had much time, but I need to research that spot in that door specifically, because I couldn't find, after a 20-minute look on Google, I couldn't really find much information. I tried a few different VPN search engines, didn't find anything else. So I don't know, man. There's one Google Street View picture from that spot, and it looks to be from a few years ago, and the roof of this room is fenced off. So I don't know.
Yeah, man. It might, like you said, it's probable that it's nothing, but on the other hand,
anything could happen up there. I'm not really sure at this point. There's some pretty cool stuff happening, and I'm going to get a drone here pretty soon. Hopefully I can get some footage with that thing too, because there's a lot of really inaccessible territory up there. Really inaccessible. There's almost 1,000 feet at the top of both these mountains that's just inaccessible for one or both sides. So you need some robotic gear for that, for sure.
Well, as we wrap up here, I definitely want to talk to you again. I love the stuff you're doing. I love how you're always in these locations above the city, checking out what I consider very magical mountain range, the Wasatch. And lastly, as far as the consciousness aspect, and you mentioned the Nimitz and how these things have a way of kind of getting into our minds. Do you believe that consciousness is the answer to a lot of these questions? Like, are we alone in the universe? What's our purpose? Why are we here?
I think so, yeah. I think if you look long enough, I think everyone finds that at some point, that everything is connected, everything is consciousness, whether you believe in God, it doesn't matter what you believe in. I think at the end of the day, we're all believing in the same one, the same grid, the same consciousness, the same ether, the same creating mind that we co-create with on a daily basis. So I'd say it's all consciousness, man. And I'd say these technologies have a large aspect of having to do with consciousness. There's probably a large aspect of them that tack into our consciousness in some way. which is cool. And yeah, I think everything is related to our perception and our reality, obviously, but there's something that connects us all, and there is a veil. A lot of people have had different experiences with it, but there's more to this life than we give it credit for. It's a lot weirder than we give it credit for sometimes. And if anybody listening to this, just look into yourself, ask questions, because that's the problem nowadays. Is I feel like not enough people ask enough questions anymore. It's not as many questions getting asked from just the regular everyday Joe that I meet on the street. And I'm just hoping that maybe thinking about these kinds of things, will help to level us up in a way, because I do feel like these kinds of things are consciousness strips in a way. So I'm hoping that, enough people get this kind of information that we can get to a place where we can all advance as a civilization later on down the road. I mean, obviously it's a pretty steep ramp that we're climbing right now, but hopefully all the stuff that you talk about in your show and all these different forms of media that are coming out and exposing people to different topics and more diverse kinds of information, I think it has a huge effect, and I'm hoping it has an even bigger effect in the future. People spread love. Everyone love each other, because just don't be afraid of anything. Everyone love each other. Everything will be fine if you just love each other and respect each other and just do your best to be a better person every day, and that's it.
Amen, brother. Thanks so much, Elevated Josh, for coming on. I hope to talk to you again soon. I hope some of the listeners reach out to me. I'll let you know what I find. And yeah, let's talk soon and keep grinding, keep searching and exploring.
I appreciate it, man. Good talking to you. You have a good day. Stay safe.
He is so great. I love talking to Josh. Elevated Josh. The guy is out there checking out exactly the type of things that interest me. The intelligence community sees the Utah Valley and Salt Lake City as prime hunting grounds for a variety of aspects of what they do, not only searching for new agents, but the authorities on the UFO and UAP issue also see it as a definitive location to test unacknowledged black budget projects over there at Dugway Proving Grounds. And that's exactly what it is. It's a proving ground. It is a place where various contractors can go and rent space, for lack of a better word, to test their toys, to test their black budget projects. And it's going to be interesting that this compelling testimony, which seems to be coming out of the Disclosure Intelligence UFO Archive, including whistleblowers. One of them is a Marine who witnessed a man-made UAP offloading illegal weapons and drugs in Indonesia in 2009. I know a few of the whistleblowers. Another one who I know personally is a gentleman who worked at the South Pole at Antarctica. He has quite a bit of disclosure. And these testimonies at specific locations go into the illegally operated UFO projects and corporations which are involved. So Elevated Josh may not be far off when you consider there are over 700 military, intelligence, and corporate whistleblowers in line to be included in this vast archive. And it's a big, big archive. So let's see what happens. We also have NASA, as he mentioned, coming out with some information. Gary Nolan, Jeremy Corbell, George Knapp, the list of people that are on this disclosure train and coming out with epic, fresh, and fundamentally new information is mind-blowing. I really liked the triangle craft over a military base in California, which George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell came out with. Although it was a couple years old, it just goes to show how slow the government is at releasing some of this stuff for public consumption. So when you're able to talk to somebody like Josh, and he can give you the inside scoop of what's going on a daily basis out at places like Dugway and the Wasatch Front, I believe that's very important to keep your hand on the pulse of the investigations and explorations of those who are involved, especially given the most recent information that is coming across the news wires, my desk, and the airwaves every week. And I 100% agree with Elevated Josh in that the information revolution will be podcasted. It's these sideline news outlets, independent media organizations, and individuals who are making the biggest leaps and bounds right now. It's not CNN, NBC, ABC. These aren't the guys that are bringing you the goods. They get it second, third, fourth, and fifth hand sometimes. So very interesting. My curiosity is definitely induced by the photos, addresses, and locations which Elevated Josh has sent me, which appear to be underground entrances or facilities, and there is a number of them. If any of our Utah peeps are out there exploring and have some information for Josh or want to meet up with Elevated Josh, please send me a message at heroparanormal@yahoo.com. You can also find Hero Paranormal on Facebook and send a personal message there. Or you can go to harrowparanormal.com and contact me there. I'll get the message to him. Also, real quick, if you've not subscribed to Hero Paranormal, please go to Patreon, search for Hero Paranormal, hit that subscribe button. For less than the price of a cup of coffee a month, you get the entire archive, everything behind the paywall included. You can also access that at harrowparanormal.com. And please like, subscribe, and share Hero Paranormal on YouTube, although I will most likely never be monetized on YouTube for a variety of reasons. When you like, share, and subscribe to the channel, it's one way to have people hear the podcast and get the word out on a grassroots level. So I appreciate that. Also, go to your social media, Instagram and Facebook, and like and follow Hero Paranormal on there. I'm telling you, there's a lot going on out there. Until next time, keep your eyes to the skies, feet on the ground, but don't forget to take a look around. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like it need Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like it need Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off.